Hello peoples of the internet, and welcome to week 20 of Starry Mountain Time Trial. Now this T65 has a 25,800 kilogram Tasty Cola trailer on it, since I need to deliver loads of cola to my sand house on the beach. Tasty Cola is disgusting, but I drink it anyway because I like the marketing. It's not got a lot of power, it's got a lot of torque, but still not enough. I mean, here you'll see, it's not the final one here, I just keep crashing it because I'm recording at half speed and I'm tired of driving it really, since it will get stuck very easily. I mean, you'll see there, it just went off the track a bit and it managed to beach itself. You can often get around corners as well here and it really struggles to put power down. I don't know what the trailer's doing, it's just something a bit awkward's going on. It doesn't want to move, and sometimes you will find traction and the front will suddenly have loads of turning and it will turn around the corner and everything will be fine. But you never really know, I just have to floor it and hope. It's making 303 horsepower. I mean, that's not a lot. We've had the Pessima GTZ making over 350, I believe. And this is a lorry. But that's because it's a diesel inline 6 to my knowledge. And it has 1355 Newton meters of torque, which is crazy, and honestly, it needs that torque to move downhill. If this was uphill, it wouldn't have done it. And yeah, I tipped it over again. That was just me being stupid trying to carry too much speed. Speed the truck really couldn't handle. So I had to hitch things up and everything again. I'm recording this at half speed since the frame rate's terrible with all the physics process on my lowly PC. So you'll see the cornering ability isn't great, nor is the stopping ability. I have a little bonfire here. Always nice to have a bonfire on Starry Mountain. Even though they banned it, I'm a rebel, so I do it anyway. I can't hide the fact that it's a horrible nightmare to drive. Once you get up to speed, it's not so bad because you don't have the problem with getting it stuck. But then the axle on the way, the leaf springs just can't take all the weight. Meaning that's what's happening here, and a lot of the time I believe the trailer was actually pushing on the wheels and it doesn't have the grunt to kind of just spin the tyres and free itself, so you have to be careful. Now the time, it set a surprisingly good time. No, who am I kidding? It set an 18:35.89 time, which is actually the third slowest vehicle on the leaderboard. It's only beaten the remote control Rock Crawler and the remote control Covet. It's literally the slowest road car we have here, even though it's not a car. It was even slower than the cement mixer. Now here we have a lovely little car, if it doesn't have speed. It's the Corolla Inline 4 manual variant of a 1960s, I believe, Corolla. It's got all the period elements you'd expect. Sloppy barge-like suspension, kind of wannabe muscle car design cues, and a decent rear-wheel drive, I believe, driveline. It does tip a lot. I mean, it's a big floaty barge. I'm not saying that's unrealistic. I could even get it drifting like a muscle car at times, but with 55 horsepower and 71 Newton meters of torque, it's hard. It has to be said, it does feel quicker than it is. It feels like a slow vehicle, but I would have never guessed it's only putting 55 horsepower down to the wheels. I would have thought it was more like 70, maybe 75. It does soak up bumps beautifully though. Probably one of the best cars at doing that we've had on the whole series. It's not sporty suspension though, and nor could I wish it to be. For what it is, it does a good job of it. I just wish it would tip a bit less, since that's rarely the epitome of comfort. Ooh, I used a fancy word. Now, it's quite stable here, as you'll see. Especially for a very, very old car. And the open differential will spin your power array round corners. It's a bit of an annoyance really, but it's just a characteristic of the car, I guess you could say. There it's sorted itself out surprisingly well. And it's an easy vehicle to drive. I mean, this was the first one I did, and I managed to get it to the end quite safely. I tried to push it harder later, and really I just ended up crashing it a lot more. But just driving it normally, you know, nothing really will go wrong. treat the car well and it'll treat you well, I guess you could say. Now, the time it set was a 9:26.86, which is very far down the leaderboard. It's just below the Pigeon XL 600cc, which is kind of a giant stupid thing, and just above the Roma Flipper configuration. So not bad for such an old Japanese car. I did round the time on this particular one to 9:27 since I kind of mistimed at the end and I was never going to do better than this one. I mean, you'll see this is relatively tidy though, considering it flipped onto its roof at the end. That's because I didn't crash, really. No intense crash at least, maybe the odd knock or bump, but you're not going to damage it driving it normally, as I said. Now here we have the Moonhawk Super Donk. It's a donk, which basically means it's got stupid wheels. I believe 24 inches, and as you'll see, the suspension isn't exactly what you'd call track prepped. It's very, very stiff. Yeah, it rides very, very high. It seems to want to tip over at every single corner, and it just does not feel nice to drive at all. And I mean, it's the kind of thing that my race driver would really complain about. Like, just look at how he's being treated. He's being thrown about all over the place because for no other reason than the car is horrible to drive. And it's not like there's any sidewall to take the impact. It's literally on one flat, and I need to stop using that word. Had a bit of a moment over dirt there. And yeah, I drive a normal Moonhawk, honestly. But the difference between this and the normal Moonhawk that's really notable is it has a Donk Life sticker on the windscreen, which obviously adds loads of power. I mean, there was a Donk wheel pack, but this has fancy suspension, it has a purple interior and the sticker, and I just decided it was worth it overall. At speed, it's not as bad as you might expect, given how terrible it can be at low speed and how much it wants to tip over. But this is not a nice vehicle to drive. I mean, you'll see here, it just wants to throw the driver about and give him a bad day. The time, though? Well, I can barely believe it. 8:36.662. Yep, a nicely sorted Corolla came, well, 50 seconds below this mess of a car. It could be to do with the fact that it's got 194 horsepower and 385 newton meters of torque, so it does at least have a good engine when you want to put the power down, but the handling is not great. I'm surprised it could carry the speeds it could even when it's so horrible. I mean, I'm clearly carrying the speeds, so it wouldn't have set a time that good. So 8:36.66 puts it just below the Moonhawk Lowrider, and that was a fairly nice Moonhawk to drive. But what's that gain me in all of it, really? It's gained me like 0.23 seconds. And it came just above the 90s Pessimist Stance, aka the Bonfire, and above a Grand Square Marshal and the Standard Ideal car. So it's basically with a badly modified car brigade. Isn't that where you expect it to be? Well, considering how terrible the suspension is, I expected it to be in the 9 minutes. Here we have the Hirochi Start. This is the 110 horsepower inline-3 turbo variant. I believe the most powerful one you can get. And it does make 110 horsepower at the wheels, as with most of the stock vehicles, even though this is a mod. And I like it. It feels like a new car to me. Even though it is based on the Hirochi, they've changed so much. They've changed the steering, the wheel, the seats, the front and rear lights. The radio's been removed and replaced with a blank plate. And yet, it's a basic car. It handles like such as well. Maybe not very well. The lower horsepower variant, the 60 horsepower old mod, I tried that and you were really struggling for power, but that was quite nice to drive. This, you can tell the 110 horsepower might be a bit too much. It's like what viewers said with a Jaguar F-Type. It's a good car with a supercharged V6, but you go with a V8, it's just a bit too much for it. I guess that's kind of a feeling this has. You get the feeling round corners when it's making all these screeching noises, you're just spinning your power away. I mean, this is a one that's a bit dodgy really. I do get it to the end though, better than my T65 one, but I get in a bit of a mess here, try and stop it tipping over, and it wants to go rallying. Yeah. These are tough cars though. Tough Japanese simplicity. It's never been more pronounced perhaps than a basic car like this. And the time this one set is an 8-minute 18.459, which puts it just below the Sunburst base and just above the Grand Marshal V8 limousine. I mean, as you'll see here, it's beginning to get pretty sketchy. It's got all kinds of bits bent up, and it doesn't like going quick anymore. But it keeps going, as a good Japanese car should, regardless of how you treat it. It just keeps on going. Now, it also beat the 90s Pessima base, and it also came just below the ETK base. So it's really with all the front-wheel drive base models, other than the ETK, which is rear-wheel drive, but the same kind of market. And yeah, I think it's done quite well for such a cheap car. It feels like it could do with more grip, but then what front-wheel drive doesn't feel like it could do with more grip? Not many, actually. You'll see I smashed it up a bit. Fair bit of damage. There's no vents in the seats or steering wheel as well. That's what I mentioned before about different parts, and the radio's blocked off. The windscreen's also cracked. This is the portable YBR. Yeah, he's a YouTuber. Obviously not as good as me, but he's still pretty good. And his car's quick as well. It's basically an ideal car, although it handles a whole lot better than the ideal car. Feels almost like it's got all-wheel drive or more weight over the rear axle. As I said it needed. It actually feels like someone's listening to me. And my criticisms, yay! As you'll see, it copes with bumps nicely. The suspension is like the ideal car. And the brakes, it will slide. As you saw back there, I had a bit of a slide. The brakes are the kind of slidey element. They'll lock up, they'll slide, but well, as long as you're careful under brakes, it's quite a nice thing to drive. Under acceleration, I don't recall it sliding. It does have a high centre of gravity though, because it's basically a box on wheels, and quite a tall box at that. And that doesn't really get in the way, but you can feel it tip on the suspension, and it is a little annoying at times. Now the engine, I believe it's a 70 horsepower engine from the Corvette DX, which is the base model. And it does a good job actually. This is the first car with under 100 horsepower to get into the under 7 minutes section of the, under 8 minutes sorry, section of the leaderboard. If it was under 7 minutes, that would be amazing. Only hill climb cars and an SBR4 convertible are there now. So yeah, it's quick. And it's a fair amount quicker. A good 45-ish seconds quicker than the standard ideal car. I think that's just the ability to put the power down better, for reasons unknown. It's on the leaderboard somewhere. And it's below an ETK V8 twin turbo and above a D-Series drag. But that ETK, that's a fairly good European estate vehicle with a decent amount of power and a pair of turbos. So to come just below that is an impressive feat. Also it came just below a CRX Racing, so not the very top of the performance cars, but it's pretty good. Here we'll see the outside. It does actually remind me of something like a Caterham actually in terms of its handling. It's kind of like a track car. That's how it feels, and until someone actually makes a track car, it's probably as close as we're going to get. Also, it's the same wheels as a lot of the hill climb vehicles had. You'll see there. Same colour as well, oddly enough. The ideal car was made by one of the developers. I believe Gabster made it, who makes the cars. Anyway, moving on, we have a 1987 Golf GTI. This one's called the One Stop. I mean, there's odd numbers and stuff I don't quite understand, but as far as I figure, the number's just wheels. And this has no hubcaps on the wheels. But you'll see the portable IBR was slower than this. Only slightly, but it was slower. And this car is still putting less than 100 horsepower down to the wheels. It's actually 980 kilograms if I remember correctly, and 110 horsepower at the engine. So not the best specs by any means. About the same as a mid-spec Corvette actually, in terms of power and weight. Perhaps a little better than that. But for what it is, it's incredibly fast. I mean, remember, this is just a regular road car from the 1980s even. It coats with bumps really nicely, but it's also what you might expect from an old car. It's a little jiggly at times. Not that it matters really, it's a front wheel drive, so you can kind of get away with the jiggliness a lot more than you can with a high power rear wheel drive. Perhaps all wheel drive car where you can slide. Now this will slide a bit under brakes. It's one of those cars, it will slide when you don't want it to, it won't slide when you do want it to. Because things are annoying like that. Maybe it only happens to me, I don't know. But it's a good car, I have to say. Even if I'm not the biggest fan of Volkswagens, it's a very capable machine. Now the time of a 751.498 puts it between a Burnside Drag and a Pigeon STI G Dirt, and also just above a Barstow Trans Am. I mean, a powerful muscle car, remember, beaten by the mighty powers of 1987 Golf. It's not a race, as I said, it's not race, it's not rally, it's just a standard old GTI. And it also came just below a Miramar race. So again, same as the portable YBR, it's not in the incredibly quick territory of the track, but for what it is, it's an incredibly capable machine, and one I'm very proud of. Also, I managed to throw it a little harder on the last one I had. I managed to extract a few more seconds out of it that way, because it just likes to be thrown around. It's not a car that asks you to be gentle with it like the Barstow Trans Am did to a certain extent. And the interior is very dull. Why I'm not a fan of Volkswagens, bit dull. Anyway, here we have perhaps an even better front wheel drive than the 1987 Golf. It's the Pessima all-wheel steer. ZXi all-wheel steer, I believe, is the full name. And this is a very nice car to drive. It's got ABS, which helps make sure it brakes nicely into the corners. The suspension is quite firm, but then it's a sports car, so that's permissible. And it feels like it's working with you as opposed to against you. It has a limited slip differential in the front to help put the power down, and the all-wheel steer mechanism really helps reduce understeer. Thought I'd had it in a sign then, but I didn't. And it's just very, very little understeer in a way that it's hard to comprehend from a front-wheel drive car, especially in this series where we saw the Hirochi Start earlier. That was understeering a fair bit. This doesn't, and that's where it gains a lot of its speed. Still only putting around 140 horsepower down, but it's actually very good at putting that power down, which is why it manages to push itself to a 745.62 time on the leaderboard. Very, very capable there. It's just below a Corvette race as well, another great front wheel drive car to drive, although a much more powerful one, so that means this is making all the speed up through corners, since chances are it's heavier and less powerful. It also came below a 200BX drag, but then perhaps that's to be expected. I mean, slower outright, much better around the corners. And came above a Roma Custom as well, which was basically a sport SUV. And a Bolide convertible, which is a fairly mid-spec European supercar. Very, very capable, this machine. And I could only think of one phrase, which is everyone needs something in life they can rely on. Although it's supposed to apply to the Golf that you saw below, it was actually more relevant to this, I found. it's always on your side. And being an old Japanese car, it will have incredible reliability and go on forever. So, you know, I can't complain. I can't really find a downside to this car other than the fact that it could do with some slightly grippier tyres, which would help, but it doesn't need them by any means. It would just be a nice to have. I mean, you'll see it's got a bit smashed up at the end, the steering rack got knocked loose, but overall, because of a lack of understeer, I found I was planing into walls less than with other cars. And I like it, I have to say. On to the next Lamborghini we have. The actually only Lamborghini we've had, if I can ever put words together properly. Now this is fast, but difficult. The suspension feels very, very soft, but with very little travel, and it can get wound up quite easily. It can want to throw you off the track, as you'll see there. On this one, I do manage to recover it a lot of the time, but again, not a great one with this car. You'll see, at times it can jiggle and knock into things. It's a big, angry beast of a car, and it makes a lot of power, as you might expect from a big angry beast of a car, as I was actually saved by a bit of mud there, oddly enough. It makes 411 horsepower and 418 newton meters of torque. Now, this is not going to make that on this mountain. I had to actually get into top gear and max it out on Grid Small Pure to get that. The transmission shifts too early to get that. In manual you could get the power, but it makes the power at the very top of the RPM range, and for whatever reason Beam doesn't like shifting that late. You'll see here though, decently stable, then everything can go a bit wiggly. Again, it gets saved by the mud. The mud's being nice to me today actually, with this car. Normally the mud's like, hey, I'm going to pull you off road and destroy your car. But with this it's kind of like, hey, carry on, have a nice day, kind sir. Yeah, and here I burst both my front tyres, just because I'm not a very good driver naturally. On the final one I didn't do this, because it would be foolish. But I was lazy here and I couldn't be bothered to reset and do the whole one again, so I just drove to the end like this. Meaning I have very restricted turning input. When I get it out of the corner, it will still put the power down and go quite nicely out of there. Now the time, it's a 7:13.39. Yes, it's not going to completely redefine physics and make me question everything like the hill climb cars did once upon a time, but it's a fairly quick vehicle. 8th on the leaderboard. It's actually very quick. Just not what I would drive, honestly. It's just below an 80 Pessima race, and that's honestly the vehicle I would take. It's easier to drive. Also just above the KC6T convertible. With how difficult this is though, and how slow it feels at times, it's a wonder how quick it is. Also the car was red, but for this particular one, it decided to turn itself black. I mean, honestly though, I don't even remember there being colour options for this, so how it changes colour miraculously, I don't know. I think there might have been an update and it says, right, I'm changing the colour of your car because I want to. So, yeah. That's all I've got to say for now, though. So, goodbye, until another day.